So what are some tools that can help you help yourself when you write? Uh, there are many automatic tools that are available today, more and more, and I'm sure that this video will be obsolete in just a few hours. There are all kinds of new things coming out. And today I'll be talking about a few tried and true ones, ways that machines, as it were, can do some of the heavy lifting for you, or at least help you um, in your endeavor to write in the most effective way possible. We're going to start with something that is probably a little controversial, which is translation, specifically what's called machine translation. Machine translation has come a long way. There are lots of funny examples that can be shown that show the faults of bad automated translation. Like this one here, I have no idea what the originally intended meaning was. Tiny grass is dreaming. Uh, or this one here, for restrooms go back towards your behind. Uh, there are many examples in Portuguese. Pão com frios means bread with cold cuts, not bread with cold, as if these pieces of bread would need a jacket or a tissue for a runny nose or something. And what I want to show you is how machine translation has evolved and how it might be able to help you. So with Google Translate open, I can put in here pão, pão com frios, pão, let me do, there we go, pão com frios. And as you can see, it's actually translated that correctly. So how is that possible? How has it gotten it so correctly? When the other sign, that funny sign that we saw before, had bread with cold, this has gotten bread with cold cuts. And basically the answer is that machine translation over the years has, through the training of artificial intelligence, has gotten better and better with more and more data. Uh, it's gotten better and better at producing more accurate translation. Now, that doesn't mean that uh, one can easily just translate a poem, for example, or song lyrics. Those will still come out funny. But getting back to the notion that we mentioned in the last video about how formulaic academic language is, because it is so formulaic, it's relatively easy to train machine translation to produce translations that replicate or approximate what a human translator will produce because of that formulaicity that is inherent in academic discourse. So I'm not suggesting that you should just do a Control C and Control V and copy an entire article into Google Translate uh, and expect a good article from that being translated. But it's a it's at least a good tool if you have a question about how to say something or to confirm a suspicion about how to formulate what you want to say to see what Google Translate says. There are other translators too. So another translator, machine translator that I can recommend is one that's called DeepL, which, like Google Translate, is free. And put in the same phrase here. Similarly, I get bread with cold cuts. And what's cool about DeepL is that they also give you some other alternatives. Bread with cold cuts, bread with cold meats as alternatives. So a possible strategy that you can use if you want to check to see if your suspicion about how to translate something is correct. You want to check how to see what millions of articles, academic articles, have said about a particular, not bread with cold cuts, but whatever term you're wanting to confirm. You can look at two different pretty reliable machine translators that are free. You could look at, okay, how does Google Translate do it, and what does DeepL have to say, and that can help you. However, again, I don't necessarily recommend you translate a whole article that way. However, if you do happen to want to go down that route of translating a whole document and then conduct what's called post-editing of that translation, you can do that by uploading an entire document, an entire Word document. A lot of people don't know that. And you can do the same thing with DeepL. You can translate an entire uh, article that way automatically and then post-edit. Google on its own is also a nice little electronic tool to use to confirm um, your your suspicions about whether uh, something sounds funny or to double check if you're saying something the right way. Here's an example of an article title that was changed after reevaluating it. So the original title, as written, was Production of Membranes of Poly. That sounded a bit funny. So in this case, it was this particular phrase was checked against um, the evidence in Google. So what did Google have to say about this? And when this was searched between uh, quotation marks, so as a fixed phrase, you see 21. Google retrieved 21 results. Moreover, if you look at these results more closely, you can see that there's a suspicion. In this case, it was a Brazilian who wrote that article, that maybe this is a peculiarity of Brazilian mistranslation, or so the combination of relatively low um, retrieval of a number of hits in Google and the fact that it's a Brazilian index and a Brazilian journal here as in the results that were returned, we might raise a suspicion that although you can understand, it may not be the best way to say that. And so rearranging that title um, to make it a sound a little bit different. So instead of poly membranes of poly, but making it polyacid membranes, you can see the results are higher, which a higher frequency is evidence that it's more widely used that way, which in academic language can be a good thing to confirm that it's the most commonly way of formulating something. And the results also show that there is a wider diversity of authors. So when you look down the results list, there seem to be authors from all sorts of uh, different um, nationalities, uh, native speaker or otherwise, and in the journal Biomaterials, which is exactly the subject area, the discipline that this author was submitting in. And so the final result is this small change from membranes of poly to poly-L-lactic membranes. Maybe seem like a small change, but when you think about how one would search for results, search for similar articles in Google and may not come to yours, at least not at the top of the list because of the way that you have formulated something in the title, it can make a difference. It certainly um, sounds better to my ears, this formulation. And so the lesson is that it to use these tools, it's not like one tool is going to do all the work for you. It takes a little detective work. It's like that image that I showed earlier in the presentation of the that robot vacuum cleaner. Those robot vacuum cleaners are really good to do sort of basic maintenance, but they miss spots, and so there's a little qualitative work that needs to take place. I'd like to show you another tool called OneLook, which is a dictionary site. which I've used over the years and recommend. It works quite well. And I want to look at what kind of results would be retrieved from looking up the word however. So I'm just going to click on this OneLook dictionary search link, and I'm going to put in the word however here in the search. And what you see here is it retrieves a number of things. First of all, and immediately it gives me a definition from this one, in this case from the Macmillan Dictionary, and I can go to that definition if I like. On the left, though, you see that there are 31 uh, dictionary entries that have been retrieved, and those are general ones. You also have specific, discipline-specific ones from computing and from medicine. One of the dictionaries that I most like to check is the Cambridge Advanced Learner Dictionary, which shows um, some good examples, but it also shows pronunciation if you want, but it also shows at what level do speakers of English use this. So B2, you can see, is fairly advanced. Beyond this, though, what I really like OneLook for is for it to help you find synonyms. So I can look for words similar to however here. And here you can see it gives me a whole bunch of them. And on each of these, I can go back and follow the same sort of path and look at examples of use and more information about those words in each of those links. Um, right. Now let's try a different word. Uh, the the adjective large. And here again, you have a definition. And let's say you get tired of using the same word over and over again. So you can find another way of saying large, sizable, gigantic, massive. And again, you can look for greater detail on those individual synonyms. And another feature which is really nice is down here where it says words that often appear near large, or popular adjectives that describe large, popular nouns described by large. These are what this is about was something called collocations. So, for example, I can click here on popular nouns described by large, and what you see is large often describes number, a large number, or large numbers, in large part, large quantities, and so on. I can find adjectives that describe large, very large, several large nouns, I would assume, after that. And then also words that often appear near large, large quantities, large scale. So these are what are called collocates of that adjective, the words that commonly appear near it. And collocation can be a real uh, important tool or important element of the way you express yourself uh, to make your discourse sound more natural and have a positive effect on how it's read. So again, these common co-occurrences, these patterns of words that commonly go together, like large quantities or a large number of something, is what's called collocation. And we'll be looking at that a bit more later on. Now, finding a problem in your manuscript um, can be like finding a needle in a haystack if you're not sure where to look. And sometimes when you're writing, you spend so much time thinking about your ideas and you see the same paragraphs over and over again that you don't even notice small issues anymore. And so um, here's an example of that. And the problem here has been underlined. But it's such a small issue that if you weren't looking for it, you might not notice it if not for the the word being underlined already. Um, so hepatotoxicity may be considered intrinsic and predictable above certain dose. And if I read it out loud like that, and with it being underlined, you can probably identify the problem, which is that um, a there is an article, an indefinite article missing here. And so if you use a tool called Grammarly, you can more easily see these problems. Again, this is a free program. A lot of you have heard of it before. If you don't, maybe you use it already. I don't recommend Grammarly for everything. So it's not very good for terminology. It's not very good for vocabulary issues. So like here you have an example where it has identified cruisy as or something wrong with it and suggesting crazy. This is it also this little arrow here uh, shows how this promisor is not really a word um, that is used. It's been translated. It's been borrowed in this case from Portuguese, and it sounds funny. And so it's not very good for vocabulary issues, but it is pretty good for small grammatical issues that you might miss. Let me show you some more examples. So here in this manuscript that was uploaded, this small little preposition here, group in, it suggested group into, and grouped into three types arguably does sound more natural. And that's something that you might easily miss or not even look twice at if you're looking at a manuscript. Here, in order to shed light, and then the problem, the Grammarly automatically identified in as a problem, and the more used preposition in this case would be on, and Grammarly was very good at quickly identifying that. And so these sort of needles in a haystack in terms of articles and prepositions that you would not normally catch. Again, this doesn't matter if whether you're a native speaker or not, but especially for non-native speakers, this is a way to help you check that out and double check your grammar use. You've put in all the right articles and prepositions. Um, but but again, just like with that metaphor of the robot vacuum cleaner, it does require you to a careful eye to make sure that you that you're not correcting something that's not incorrect um, or making sure that the suggestions are valid ones. So it does require some work on your part. And an example of that is here, as I pointed out earlier, there's an article missing. I know that it's an indefinite article, but if you work from a if you are a speaker of a language that doesn't use an article system like English does, for example, Russian or Japanese, then you might not be sure whether the article is an indefinite or definite article, and here it gives you both options. So that can be confusing. Uh, is it above a certain dose or the certain dose? I know that it's a certain dose, but if you're not certain, then you can use other tools that I've already presented here today. For example, if you put in quotation marks, the phrase above a certain dose, you can see that it retrieves some 732 results. And if I put in above the certain dose, I get nothing. So no matches. So that would be pretty strong evidence that it's should be above a certain dose. It's getting back to the detective work that I talked about with all these tools. Finally, the last thing I would recommend is that you keep a journal handy. It doesn't have to be a physical one, but it can be an electronic one on an app on your phone, doesn't matter. Just something that if you really want to improve your language and you want to remember uh, the lessons that you teach yourself through these explorations with these online tools, it's good to make note of them. You might think that you'll remember later on, but keeping a note of these separate vocabulary/grammar book can be a useful tool later on for you to review. And yeah, have fun with these tools. I hope that they help you. Again, you can't let them do all the work, but they certainly do help out. And if you put on your detective cap, you can get pretty far with these tools.